All right, so today is September 6th, and we're going to cover chapter 16. So in chapter 15, like I had mentioned, it's more like the Upanishad, and it's complete knowledge because it's knowledge about the Jeev, Jagat, and Ishwar, the three subjects which are part of Jnana Yoga. So knowledge is considered complete only when it covers these three topics, and I'd mentioned that last time. So knowledge of what? So it's one of the things is obviously knowledge of Brahman, of Ishwar, Brahmagyan. That is the subject of the Upanishads. That's also subject of Gita. And in order to be prepared for knowledge, to attain knowledge, certain purification has to happen. Only a student who is prepared for knowledge, who has been purified to a certain extent, who has attained certain virtues, only then does reading this knowledge actually create a realization. Otherwise, you see, knowledge becomes information. You can see, knowledge, you can memorize knowledge. You see a lot of people in the world who know knowledge a lot. It becomes an intellectual study. It's just information. It's just stored in their memories. And for others, even though you know that you are Brahman, you know that you are Atma, the realization doesn't happen. Why does it not happen? Even if you do want to attain, you have the sincerity, everything is there. But why is it then that realization doesn't happen? Because the prerequisites, which is purity, which is clarity, which is being a virtuous person, is not there. So in this chapter, it discusses the virtues and the vices. So one thing to remember is that the virtues that I mentioned here, the Devic qualities, the Sattvic qualities, even though it's required as a prerequisite, it's not that you have attained, 100% of that. But it means that you're not negative most of the time, So 50+% of the time, you're in the virtuous area. I mean, you can't be rid of anger 100%. You can't be rid of greed 100%. You can't be rid of desires 100%. Some of these things will be there, but they're not predominant in you. So even though when you read these virtues, first thing is like, it's impossible for me to attain this. And when you read the vices, you'll say, well, I get angry sometimes, whatever. So don't think like, it has to be 100%, okay? Because what happens is the virtues also build as you attain higher states of evolution. These virtues also increase. So it's a perpetuating cycle. The virtues that you attain, because you have to work on it. You have to work on yourself to attain virtues. And as you attain that virtue, that level of evolution happens. Then you attain more in the virtues, then more evolution happens. So it's like that, it's not like one shot. So, but the most difficult part in the spiritual, in the spiritual path is to work on yourself, to work on yourself. That is true tapasya, that is true penance. How do I remove these negative patterns of anger, of jealousy, of greed, of lust, of desire, of attachment, all of these things? How do I, through penance, it's a practice, that is the true sadhana. True sadhana is changing, like a train track, changing the track from the negative vices, change the track to the positive virtues. So this chapter is called the Vibhag, the the division of Daivik and Asurik, the virtues versus the vices. And these virtues and vices, there are in you also in certain amounts. Like, you can say you have 60% of virtues and maybe 40% vices, or whatever it is. And it's also in you also, and it's in society also. There are certain virtuous societies, there are certain vicious cultures, societies, or people, or whatever. And when we look at other traditions, other cultures, you can never judge and say, that religion, that country, that culture has vices or is virtuous. You can never divide the world based on nationality or religion or culture or race or anything, or caste or anything like that. The only division that is there is of virtues and vices. Like somebody will say Islam has this vice, or Hinduism has this vice of casteism, or whatever, or Christianity has this vice of conversion. Whatever it is, you really cannot divide the world based on religion. If you truly look at it, what you are dividing is, the division is on virtues and vices. You're saying that this is right and this is wrong. This is a good value, this is a human value, and this is a human vice. That is the real division actually in humans. So always remember that when somebody argues and says, this religion is like this, or whatever, this nationality people are like this, or whatever, stray away from that. Have the wisdom to know that the division amongst humans is, and within yourself, is of virtues and vices. That's very important to take away from this chapter. So again, this is preparation. It is something that you have to work on yourself to switch from vices to virtues. So it's a preparation for knowledge. Now, in the chapter, only the first three verses are dedicated to virtues. The rest of it is mostly vices that it talks about. So let me just look at my notes here. So the Daivik Sampatti, these are the virtues. They are born out of a sattvic nature, and the asuric, the demonic, or the not demonic really, the vices, they are born out of the rajasic and the tamasic nature or tendencies. Okay, this is the difference. So as you increase in sattva, automatically the virtues will increase as you purify. So the Daivik Sampatti and this thing. So I'll just summarize them, okay? Because and in that PDF they're very well summarized, because some of these are actually repeated multiple times in different verses. So Daivik Sampatti, which it starts from, which is listed in verses 1 to 3. See, the very first one it talks about, the very first virtue mentioned in verse number 1, the first word is fearlessness. Now, if you remember, in the 13th chapter, verse 8 is also a list of virtues. The very first one was humility. And I said, if you get humility, which is the absence of ego, a lot of these other virtues will come on its own. Now here, the virtue starts with, the Daivik Sampatti starts with fearlessness. Okay? If you truly analyze these virtues and vices, it comes down to two things. One is fear as being one of the roots of vices, fear being the root cause of vice. I mean, of course, it's ignorance, but because of ignorance, you have a certain fear of death or whatever it is, fear of the unknown. But if you look at the two big divisions, one is fear and the other is love. So From love comes the fountainhead of many virtues, and from fear is the root cause of many vices. So the first one it says is fearlessness. Now, if you attain fearlessness, a lot of the other stuff would have already been accomplished or would be accomplished on its own. So that is why it's listed first. It's a very difficult thing to attain fearlessness completely. So say tomorrow somebody says you have cancer or something, of course your first reaction is fear of death. So it's not like you can say you don't fear death and all that, but when it strikes you in your face, whether it's you or a loved one, it will affect you. But it doesn't mean that you have to be completely fearless. You may have an initial reaction to fear, but then you can use wisdom, you can use meditation, you can use your devotion to get over that fear and come back and compose yourself and realize, I am Atma, I am indestructible, the Atma is not touched by disease, and so forth. So you have to understand that you shouldn't be hard on yourself either. It's a process. It's not like suddenly you'll be fearless. And even if you react with fear with something, it's okay. As you evolve, the amount of time that you feel something will reduce, and the intensity with which you experience it will reduce. That is evolution. It's a gradual process. So you won't be stuck in it and be overtaken by it as much. So slowly and slowly it'll improve. The second one is purity. Now again, purity is a very broad term. But purity in the sense that you lack negativity. That's what it means, negative thoughts, negative feelings. Third is scriptural study. Because what happens with scriptural study is your mind becomes purified. So for some time, while you're doing some spiritual reading or you read a quote, it makes you reflect. It brings that positivity into you. That's why scriptural study is mentioned. Charity, giving selflessly, loving somebody unconditionally, giving away something that you love. Charity, it's not just a mechanical thing, but it's from your heart. It's pure, it's authentic. Sense control, meaning you don't get swayed by your senses, that you use your wisdom to curb your senses. Worship of God, devotion, which is very important, because devotion purifies your emotions. We all seek divine love, and it purifies that emotional love into devotional love. Then 7 is austerity. Now austerity will be expanded in the 17th chapter, but there is certain discipline you need to obey when you think, when you talk, when you act. There's an austerity you have to, it's a yoga, it's like I said, it's tapasya and sadhana to attain austerity. It's a practice you have to do to attain a certain amount of austerity when you speak, because speech can really harm you as well as other people, even your thoughts. So austerity, it'll be expanded later, like I said. Straightforwardness. Now straightforwardness, of course, you understand, it's you're the same inside, outside, you don't deceive people, you're not a hypocrite, and so forth. Non-violence, kindness and absence of all ill will, it's straightforward. Truthfulness is straightforward. Renunciation. Now renunciation is a state, is an inner attitude. Renunciation doesn't mean you leave everything and you don't care. Renunciation means you're not attached to it. You're not greedy about it. You don't lack lust or this craving. It's an inner attitude of renunciation. Calmness and patience. Now, even I don't have that much patience. I'm a impatient person. But I'm improving. But calmness means lack of anger, and patience means, of course, patience. But it's it's easier said than done. How much patience do you have, and with which skill you use, what skill you use to attain more patience. Now, it doesn't mean if somebody is doing something wrong that you just stay patient. You also have to have skill in how to correct a situation if somebody is doing something wrong. So there's a skill, to us. It's an attitude of patience, but you also have the skill to make sure that you correct the situation calmly. So calmness and patience kind of come together. You can't have one without the other. If you're impatient, you won't be calm. If you're calm, you won't be impatient. But it's a skill that you have to understand that you be patient, but you also correct a situation if it's being prolonged unnecessarily. So, and then absence of slander, absence of greed, gentleness, modesty. Again, modesty here. Modesty is basically humility. It's the absence of ego, it's the absence of arrogance. So having modesty is also something that you understand from it within, that there is something there are always greater people than you. There is always God above us all. So modesty will check you always at all levels of spiritual growth. Even if you get certain siddhis, spiritual powers, you attain a certain amount of knowledge, you evolve to a great extent, even at that level you can get stuck in that ego and arrogance. Even as a siddha you can get stuck. The only way you can save yourself from being stuck is because of modesty. And modesty can only come when you always surrender to the divine. You must remember the divine is still above you. You should never be deluded that you are so enlightened and that you get this ego about it, because if you're truly enlightened, you won't have an attitude, you won't have this thing that I'm great, or I have certain powers, or whatever it is. So at every level, no matter which level you're at, you can get stuck, and the way to save yourself from that is always to humbly surrender yourself at the feet of the Lord. And that will bring humility, that will bring modesty, and that is why you bow down, because the head is a symbol of ego. And when you touch somebody's feet or you bow down in front of God, you are actually saying there is always somebody greater than me. That will bring modesty. It's a very important virtue, because if you don't have that and you proceed to knowledge can lead to arrogance. You'll see a lot of people who are very knowledgeable or intellectual, they're very arrogant, and they're very condescending, they're very judgmental, because that preparation has not come yet. They've gone and proceeded to gain this information and memorize, and they know all the shastras, or they might be a scientist or whatever it is, but they don't have modesty because they lack the heart aspect. They have the intellectual aspect, but they lack the heart, the devotion. Okay, and then 17 is steadfastness and absence of restlessness. It's sort of like impatience, but restlessness, and you have to stay steady, stay centered, keep going, persevere, don't be so restless. Why isn't this happening? Why being restless all the time. It's sort of like impatience. So being calm and steadfast, being patient and not restless, similar things. And strength. Now, strength is not outer strength. It's not force. It's inner strength. It's the inner power. That strength where which you gain from these virtues, then nothing hurts you. You don't get hurt. Oh, somebody said this to me. Oh, I'm hurt. No. If you gain certain virtues, nothing will affect you. No problems will affect you. No worries will affect you. No anxieties will affect you. No one will hurt you. Disease won't throw you off. I mean, you won't be thrown off your center at every little thing. That's inner strength. That is how to tackle problems, how to have that inner power. That is true strength. So those are the virtues. And then in the vices list, the asuric sampatti, first is vanity or ego, arrogance, vanity, Second is arrogance. Third is pretension. Fourth is anger. And these are very obvious, so I don't have to go into it. Five is cruelty. 6 is ignorance. 7 is impurity. Absence of religious discipline. Absence of truthfulness. Absence of faith in God. The endless desire for sensual pleasure. Delusion. False values. Worry, attachment, greed, egoism, and slander. Now, all of these are then in verse number 21. They are summarized into 3. And so it says that the 3 basic materialistic traits of desire, anger, and greed are the threefold gateway to hell. So, you can summarize these as the root from which the other vices come. They are sort of the groups. From anger will come a lot of other things. From greed will come a lot of other things. From desire will come a lot of other things. So these are the 3 things which lead to the gateway to hell. They are the threefold gateway to hell. You can read those verses, where it describes the man, a person, not a man, a person who has these asuric qualities. Where as you read those verses, you will see, you'll recognize it in people around you. You will see, not to judge. It is not to judge people, but it's to understand. Understanding is knowledge, not judgment. Judgment is not wisdom. But for you to understand that these are the vices a person has and these are the virtues a person has, and what rules that person, what majority of the time is this person got virtues, or so that means that person is more virtuous and has lesser vices. But it's not to judge somebody or even to judge yourself. That's not the point here. But when you read these things, when you read the vices and virtues, you have a better understanding of yourself, and you have a better understanding of people, of cultures, of things. You will see, like they say, be in satsang. Satsang means be in the company of sattvic people. So when you recognize that this person has more sattva, you should be with people who are more sattvic than you. Then they pull you up. Now, if you be with people who are rajasic or tamasic, they'll pull you down, right? So it is for the wisdom to make out the difference, the vivek, to know the difference between devik and asuric, that you should be able to recognize them. And then the chapter concludes by talking about the scriptures. Now that is why scriptures are required. Why are they required? Because they list out the values that humanity has to follow. If there's no scriptures, if there is no values listed, what is the authority that would say that this is a virtue or this is a vice? Nowadays, you see that it's in constitutions, now it's a sort of a commonly agreed basis for a community to follow a set of laws of what they think is right and wrong. But what is right and wrong is based on values. Ultimately, is based on values. Like, Christianity has the 10 Commandments, or Islam has the Sharia and it's based on the Sunnah and blah blah blah, and Hinduism has the Vedas and Gita. The values are the ones by which you determine whether this is a scripture. When it says scripture, scripture doesn't just mean Vedas or Gita. Scripture means any knowledge that bears this truth. That is scripture. So the scripture is also the Bible. The scripture can also be the Quran. The scripture can also be the Gita. But when the values are listed, you will know that this is the values by which we will decide our constitution. We will decide the laws which will say this is right or wrong. So you can't have hate and, harm people or have murders or whatever. I mean, constitutions are based on something, right? They're based on certain values that we have commonly agreed to as a community to say, these are the values, and based on these values we decide the law. But you see, in ancient days when you had kingdoms, the kingdom's laws were based on Shastra, they were based on scripture, they were based on religious texts. Now, of course, this is very apparent in the Christian kingdoms and as well as the Islamic kingdoms. The political system was purely based on the religious texts in ancient societies, whether it's Hinduism, Islam, or Christianity. But today, because there's a separation in many countries like US, but still it's based on Christian values. In America's constitution is based on Christian values, even if you have separation of church and state. A lot of the Indian values are also based on Hindu values, or there's a separate law for Muslims, but you can't just come out of thin air. I mean, you have to base it on something. So, but it's a commonly, when you say it's a secular country, it's a commonly accepted values. And if you see, most of these values are common across religions. Okay, amongst religions or traditions, most truthful traditions share the same values that are mentioned here. So it talks about Shastra and why Shastra is important, because you have to have some authority that tells you this is a vice and this is a virtue. This is a common set of human values we have decided to follow in this era. Now, in the Gita, these are eternal values. They are not. One is that there's an eternal aspect to values. Okay, laws have to change when you have. There's a difference between values and there's a difference between a law. Value is something which is universal and it is eternal, like modesty, gentleness, love, absence of evil, purity, chastity, study of scripture. These are generic. They are, they're not specific. They are not applied. When you apply a value, when you apply a virtue, you create a law. And you say you cannot murder somebody, for example. That makes it based on non-violence. Or, we don't have a law like this, but there's a commandment about adultery. One of the 10 commandments is about adultery and, a punishment for adultery. Now, the punishment and the laws have to change from age to age. You cannot stone people to death or cut off people's arms and legs or whatever. The applied aspect of it has to change as the ages change. You can't have the same kind of brutal laws like you may have in certain medieval times, or the laws in the time where it was an agrarian, maybe at the time of the Gita, the laws, the applied values, say during the Mahabharata. You can't have those kind of laws in a modern society. And modern society has different things. Now we have an electronic age and stuff like that. So the applied values, which are laws, they have to change from time to time. But here it says follow Shastra, because Gita is not a law book compared to the Quran. If you read the Quran, it is applied laws. It's specific laws. It says do this, do this, do this. Whereas the Gita, this is very generic. It's not a law book. It's not a rule book. It's simply giving you the base, the base value, the underlying virtue upon which then society should write the laws and change them from time to time. But essentially it's talking about what is the need for Shastra. Okay? So it talks about the importance of Shastra. And that concludes the chapter. So it's an easier chapter to read, I think. So I'll just go over some verses because we have a lot of time. I'll just go over some verses. Unless you guys have questions.
Vinita, I have a question. You mentioned about inner strength.
Sorry?
How do we gain strength in us?
What's that? Sorry?
You mentioned inner strength.
Yes.
How do we gain this inner strength within ourselves?
The inner strength comes from realizing your true nature. Your true nature is that of Atma, that is eternal. Once you realize that you're not your body, mind, emotions, insecurities, whatever, negative, whatever, positive, doesn't matter. You're not your personality. There is something deeper in you that is always shining. That's something which is always permanent, that has stayed untouched even through all the problems and all the issues that you might have had in life, whether it's health or disease or, whether it's health, wealth or relationships, that has withered the storms, all the storms that has sort of been there in spite of them, What is that? What is that which you cannot touch? It is beyond that, and it's like the sun. It's shining. It is the source from where your personality comes, from where thoughts come, from where feelings come. You have to experience that inner core, that the axle, the center of the wheel, that you are nothing but unconditional love. You are bliss, you are consciousness. You're like a sun, like a radiant sun of bliss, of love, and that is strength. So as you experience your true nature and you realize that which you are, then you will gain that inner strength. Now, the way to experience that inner self, there are two ways. One is from your own efforts, through meditation, through inquiry, through knowledge, gaining knowledge, reading, having devotion. So when you have devotion, you'll realize your unconditional love, because you have unconditional love for God, you have unconditional love for your children. That should make you realize you have unconditional love within you. When you read wisdom and the ahas come and you knew it, you agree with it because you know it already. You will know that wisdom is your own. You are wisdom. Then you realize that you are unconditional love, your wisdom, you feel this love, all this. So it's from your own efforts. The other way to realize your true nature is when you meet somebody, when you are with somebody like a guru, a teacher, or somebody who's evolved, who's naturally evolved. There are many people in this world who are not gurus, Like I met a lady recently. Oh my gosh, she's an amazing woman. She is a embodiment of love, humility, and she's so wonderful. Such a beautiful person. Very evolved. She used to go into states of samadhi on her own, like As a child, she's just going to transcend into trance on her own. But anyway, but when you're with people who exude strength, this inner strength, this glow, this divine glow, this, you sense it in somebody who's very spiritual, who's very evolved. When you're in that presence, it'll rub off on you. You'll resonate with that. So that is a second way of also realizing your true nature, because when it resonates in you, it'll act like a catalyst. It will evoke that same state in you. Okay, does that help, Jyotika?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. If you don't have questions, I'm going to read some of the verses. So, verse number 4, it talks about hypocrisy, ignorance, arrogance, self. Now, when you see a person or you see your own self, if you see this, don't judge it, but see if that is there. Hypocrisy, arrogance, self-importance, anger, harshness, and ignorance. Ignorance being the root cause. These are born from a demonic nature. Then verse number 5. The divine nature is for liberation and the demonic nature is for bondage. So those who are on the path of sattva, who are evolving higher, their desire is for liberation. Whereas the demonic, the people who are on the descending path, their desire is for more bondage to the world, bondage to their senses, sensual stuff, and such things. There are two types of being this world, the divine and the demonic. So then he goes on to explain, the demonic know not what they do. They don't know what they're doing. They are essentially doing it mechanically, but they don't understand. They do not know what to do and what to refrain from. They don't have the wisdom to know I shouldn't be doing this and what to refrain from. Neither purity nor right conduct nor truth is found in them. And then it gets worse and worse. And then they say, the universe is without truth. It's without any moral basis. There is no such thing as God. It's brought about simply by union. Basically, it talks about life. Life, whether it's the universe or human life, is brought about by mutual union with lust for its cause. What else? That's how they talk, And then holding this view, these ruined souls of small intellect and cruel deeds come forth as enemies of the world for its destruction. Because they really are very rampant in the world. They will take the world towards destruction. Filled with insatiable desires, full of hypocrisy, pride, and arrogance, holding evil ideas through delusion, they work with impure resolves, obsessed with immeasurable cares, which end only with their death, regarding gratification of lust as their highest aim, and certain that this is all that matters. And then bound by 100 ties of hope, given to lust and anger, they strive to obtain by unlawful means hoards of wealth for sensual enjoyment. So they say, this I have gained today, this I shall desire to obtain, this is mine, and this wealth shall also be mine in the future. Okay, so this is mine, this is what I shall obtain, this wealth is mine, and this wealth will also be mine. That enemy has been slain by me. They say, they talk like this, this enemy has been slain by me. The enemy doesn't have to be like that, they like to put down people, for the elevation of their own ego. So this enemy has been slain by me, even if it's in an argument. And Others shall also I shall destroy. I am the Lord, I am the enjoyer, I am perfect. They think they are perfect. There's nothing wrong in them. They have all the virtues in the world and they don't have to change because they're perfect. They think they're powerful and they think they're happy. I am rich, I am well born. Who else is equal to me? They think as such, or they even say that. I will sacrifice, I will give charity and money, and I will rejoice. Now, here, this charity is only a show of their wealth. It's not true charity. So, when it says, I will do charity, I will give, and I will rejoice, and all that stuff, it's all a show, It's a show off. It's not real. Thus, they are deluded by their ignorance. Bewildered by many a fancy, entangled in the snare of delusion, addicted to the gratification of lust, they fall into a foul hell. Self-conceited, stubborn, filled with pride, intoxication of wealth, they perform sacrifices in name only out of ostentation. So that's what I said, no? It's only for show. Contrary to scriptural ordinance. And then given to egoism, power, arrogance, lust, anger, these malicious people hate me meaning the divine consciousness and all those holy things. People hate me in their own bodies, so they hate the consciousness in themselves. What happens is they've killed their conscience. They are not guided by their conscience anymore. So they hate me. Krishnji is saying me with an uppercase M. They've killed that conscience in themselves and in those of others as well. These cruel haters are worst among men in the world. I throw these evil doers forever into the wombs of demons only. So they are born into tamasic people, tamasic or rajasic people. Entering demonic wombs and deluded in birth after birth, not attaining me, they thus fall, O Arjun, into a condition still lower. So they are in the downward spiral. And then verse number 21 is what summarizes all of this. It says, lust, anger, and greed. These are the 3 gates to hell. Okay?
Right.
Can I ask a question, Vinita?
Yeah. I was waiting.
There are 2 questions. There are 2 questions. The first is, does the Bhagavad Gita have any guidance on how much charity one should give?
No.
Okay.
There's no applied laws. No. Like I said, Gita is not a rule book. It's not a law book. Unlike, like I said, the Quran, it says give 5%, blah, blah, blah. It tells you exactly what to do. Because the laws will change from time to time and they have to be revised from time to time. It depends on the person, it depends on the place, it depends on the time. So it will not give exact rules and laws that you should contribute 5% of your salary, what you should give depending on your... it has certain, Dharma Shastras are there, but I don't want to lead you in that direction because people don't understand Dharma Shastras, like Manusmriti. People don't understand and I don't want to take you in that direction. So if anybody states the Manusmriti to you or any other Dharma Shastra, please don't pay attention. It was for a specific time, place and everything, and it said, actually in the Vedas it said, Dharma Shastras have to be written for every age. You cannot have eternal Dharma Shastra, So,
I mean, there is no guidance at all in any scripture moving beyond Bhagavad Gita on what one should do in Hinduism.
There should be a Dharma Shastra for this age, for different countries, but we don't have it. It kind of ended after Gita. So during the time of Gita, we did have a Dharma Shastra for guidance, for the Dharma Shastra, basically the guidance that you are asking for has to be per place. Now, if I tell you in a desert, if I tell you, donate water, there's no water there. How can I ask you to donate water? Or, donate wood or do something like that. You cannot donate wood in a desert. So, the Dharma Shastras have to be per place, time, and person. Now, if I tell a renunciate, a Swami to donate, you don't ask a Swami to donate. So it has to be based on your Varan, on your ashram. So Varan ashram. So Dharma is a very huge topic. Dharma. Because when it's your duty to do something, it has to depend on the place, time, and person. Person meaning your dharma, and your stage in life and your occupation. Okay, I'm putting it in general English terms. I don't want to put too much this thing, so you understand what I mean. Depending on the person, on his occupation, depending on his ashram. You can't ask a student to donate, they have taken a loan. How can you ask a student to donate? So it is only during the grahasth ashram, you see. So all these things are written, but taking all this guidance into consideration, you should write a Dharma Shastra, which is today it's a constitution. The constitution of the country is supposed to be your Dharma Shastra, but it should be based on Shastra. But unfortunately, we got, each kingdom, even in the Pandavas, the people like Vidur and many other of these rishis, which were the guiding principles of every kingdom, they used to give guidance on how to write the laws for that kingdom. But after the moment Krishnji left the planet, we dived into this dark age, and we lost a lot of this guidance where you should write Dharma Shastras for that age, for the that's all gone now. We only have constitutions. But actually in the golden age we did. Like if you look at Vikramaditya, if you look at the Gupta dynasty, a lot of that was based on Shastra. So I shouldn't say. We did have a golden age in India, and a lot of those things were based on Shastra. So it's not all bad.
Okay, one more thing. There's this term called delusion, which you've referred to many times, comes up often in the spiritual world. What is delusion? I've looked up at several places. I have an understanding. But what is delusion according to you? Deluded mind.
Delusion. When you think something is real, when it's temporary, unreal. So when you think something is permanent, when it is impermanent, that is, you're deluded. Like I'll tell you, I was talking to somebody today. So emotional love, like you have this attachment for a person, you have expectation for emotional love from a person, that's delusion. You're actually looking for divine love. Everybody is looking for unconditional divine love, but you're deluded by your craving for emotional love. So you're deluded. You are pursuing emotional love, you're expecting emotional love. I'm just bringing this up because I was talking to somebody else today, I was helping about this thing. If you really, I'm just giving you an example, okay? So if you really look at what you're longing for, if you study it, if you understand it, if you reflect on it, you will realize what you're truly looking for is that most perfect, that permanent love, which is perfect, which is never changing, it is eternal, it's the highest, it's the best, you can never find fault in it, it never ends, it never changes. That is divine love. You're looking for unconditional love. And you go and look for it in people and demand and expect it from somebody, saying in an emotional way, in this craving, in this desire, in this attraction of emotional love. Now emotional love will always disappoint you. That is delusion, because that craving, that attraction for that emotional love is so intense that you get drawn into it. That is why the tapasya, that is why you need tapasya. You need to understand emotional love leads to pain. That's it. How many times do you have to go through that pain to realize emotional love leads to pain? That is a mirage. That is delusion. When you chase a mirage, it's delusion. Does that help understand?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, Sumanji is very busy shoveling something. Sumanji, I can see you hustling. Are you in the Bay Area? I think he can't hear us. Sumanji, are you
Hello?
in the Bay Area? Can you
Yeah,
hear me?
yeah, yeah. But I couldn't get through the laptop, so I had to manage through my iPhone. Then. There was some
Okay.
problem.
Anyway, the recording will be there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, make sure you apply these things in your life. Whenever you see judgment, whenever you see, this thing over the years, this chapter has stayed with me so much. This chapter has stayed with me so much, you cannot even imagine. I keep going back to this chapter over and over and over again. And everything I see this division of the virtues and the vices. And people want to, humans want to be divided by boundaries, by religion, by caste. That is not the division. You can't say all of this is bad, all of this is good. It's not like that. The division is only of vices and virtues, okay?
I have the same kind of question that Jyotika and others have, and that is, even though Gita teaches us that these are the Devi Sampata, like you should be fearless and stuff, and the Asuri is greed and desire and anger, but it never teaches us how to get rid of it.
No. It's telling you don't realize.
Or how to achieve the strength. Or even I felt like, I don't know. I mean, I feel like I started this course with the idea that I will get some guidance. It gives me the information, it gives me the knowledge that, do the meditation, do the devotion, do the sense control, but doesn't guide you
But that's
through.
how you'll attain it. See, in my own spiritual path, because Gita has been my guidance. So it is not that you just read the Gita and you'll attain it. So I read the Gita, but I have to assimilate it within myself. So when it talks about Karma Yoga, if you have attained Karma Yoga, you will attain a lot of these virtues. If you do truly practice Karma Yoga, you will attain 50% of these virtues. Because for Karma Yoga, you have to have detachment, you have to have compassion. Now, if you have dispassion and compassion, that is 50% of the virtues. So, that's Karma Yoga. You cannot serve people unconditionally without any selfish without dispassion, compassion. So, you have to assimilate the Gita, not just read it. It takes years, lifetimes. So you read it, you reflect on it to remove doubts, or you discuss it in a group, with us or me or another satsang group, or reflect within yourself to remove doubts. How is it possible? What does this mean? All these doubts. You discuss, you ask your guru. Once you've removed your doubts and this clarity comes, once that clarity comes, then you put it into practice. It's a practice, that is sadhana. Every time you go in the wrong direction, you have to change tracks. That is tapasya. You have to cut it off and say no. No is a very powerful word. You have to cut it off and say no, I will not. And switch. That is very difficult to practice. Everything is not easy. It is tapasya and sadhana again and again, every day. I mean, I still get angry very often. I mean, but at least it's getting better, I'm not 100% free of anger, but I think the amount of time I'm angry, the intensity, and blah, 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 it's gone down significantly. But that my family can say, I shouldn't say, but I feel.
No, that I understand that the practice and sadhana plays the role in person's character and everything. But like negative or asura vritti, they keep on saying desire, greed. I don't think most people at certain age or certain time they have that desire or greed. But then in personally my case, I feel like anger is the only one I do not control. Sometimes I don't show it to others, but inside I know I'm angry.
Don't ever suppress anger. That is very unhealthy. Suppressed anger causes disease. So never suppress anger. And in fact, Dolores Cannon, who was a healer, she said suppressed anger can lead to cancer. So don't suppress anger. Yeah, it's not necessary, I mean, if you're reading the Gita, obviously you've come a long way. Not people who are already got a lot of desires and greed, they will not take the time to sit and understand the Gita. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of these things would have already reduced in people who are listening to the Gita already. Not necessary, but they will not, people with vices will not take the time out from their lives to go through a Gita. They won't even be interested, actually. So the sadhana for every yoga, so karma yoga, bhakti yoga, kriya yoga, and gyan yoga is different sadhana. For gyan yoga, the sadhana is shravan manan nididhyasanam. Shravan, you understand, listening. Mananam is reflection. Third is nididhyasanam, which is integrating it into yourself. Not just meditation, but it is an integration of that knowledge which becomes wisdom.
Okay, thank you.
Alright, we'll talk next week. Very good chapter coming up, number 17. It's really good, really good.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.